The past month or so, I haven't gotten all that much done. I've finished maybe one book and then started like 5 more, which is my fault, of course. My excuse is that I'm reading Paradise Lost right now, which is a book that I want to spend time on. So my reading has been unproductive, but I've been very productive on the book buying end. I do have some neat stuff to share with you. A lot of it comes from a trip that I took to San Diego like a week or 2 ago. And book buying on a trip is always interesting because you don't want to come home with like bags and bags of stuff. I think I did a pretty good job. I came home with like 5 or 6 books. That's not too bad. Shopping in a different city, it's a different kind of shopping, right? I didn't want to come home with stuff that I could have found here locally. I put back a relatively cheap volume of T.S. Eliot's essays, put back a nice hardcover of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, just because I can find that stuff anywhere. It's not special, it's not something that I'm going to have tied to the trip in my memory. Instead, what I did was I sat down in front of the poetry section in every bookstore I went in and flipped book by book through poets that I didn't know, trying to find something that was special, someone that to me at least would be a discovery, and somebody whose voice felt sympathetic to mine, even if their work isn't very important. All right, so let's look at the fruits of my labor. This first book is the most beat up of the bunch. Hopefully you can see. It's also maybe the best known poet of the 3 I got. This is the poems of Rupert Brooke, published by the Folio Society in 1948, which I think makes this the first Folio Society book I own. Someone has gone through and pasted in clippings of Rupert Brooke. I have a bunch of the loose newspaper clippings in the back. This was in a $2 bin outside a bookstore. I didn't know much about it. I didn't recognize the poet. I did flip through and fell in love with a lot of the poetry in here. Till heaven cracks and hell thereunder dies in her ultimate mad fire, and darkness falls with scornful thunder of dreams of men and men's desire, then only in the empty spaces, death walking very silently, shall fear the glory of our faces through all the dark infinity. So clothed about with perfect love, the eternal end shall find us one, alone above the night, above the dust of the dead gods alone. He fits in with a poet that I showed in my last video, Isaac Rosenberg. This guy is another one of the World War I poets. Another one who also died in action. I'm starting to see a trend here. There's a couple other poets I know who are on that list, so I may keep an eye out for more. Next is Dartmouth Lyrics by Richard Hovey. I can't shake the feeling that I've seen this before somewhere and did not buy it. This is published in 1924, but I believe that Richard Hovey was writing a lot of them towards like the very end of the 19th century. It is called Dartmouth Lyrics because a lot of his poems are about Dartmouth, or the landscape around it, but some of them are actual collegiate spirit poems, I believe, which have become like the official songs of the school. Despite the introduction trying to convince you that Dartmouth was the most important subject of this poet, his nature poetry is really quite pleasant to read. It feels very rich and energetic, feels distinctly within like the American poetic tradition. I'll read you the poem that struck my eye. This is from his poem Spring. And do I not hear the first low stirring of that great spring, thrill in the underworld of the cosmic year, the wafture of scant violets presaging the roses and the tasseled corn to be, a yearning in the roots of grass and tree, a swallow in the eaves, the hint of coming leaves, the signals of the summer coming up from Arcady. For surely in the blind, deep-buried roots of all men's souls today a secret quiver shoots, an underground compulsion of new birth lays hold upon the dark core of our being, and unborn blossoms urge their uncomprehended way towards the outer day. Unconscious, dumb, unseeing, the darkness in us is aware of something potent burning through the earth, of something vital in the procreant air. Is it a spring indeed, or do we stir and mutter in our dreams only to sleep again? What warrant have we that give not heed to the caprices of an idle brain that in its slumber deems the world of slumber real as it seems? He had a couple volumes of poetry, I think a good number. It's like at least over 10, and you can still find him. He was big enough at one point to at least have one biography written about him. As far as I can tell, he doesn't currently have much relevance, but I find it quite lovely. This was not from the same bookstore. This was from the other bookstore that I went to in San Diego. And this poet is the deadest of the three, as in, like, never really alive to begin with. This is The Winds of Dawn by John Ransom Palmer. The cover is actually attached upside down. Published in 1927. Here you can see The Winds of Dawn. When I looked this up in the bookstore, this copy was one of like 3 I could find available on the internet. I've looked this guy up since. This is kind of the only volume of his that is easy to find. Relatively easy to find. There were a couple others that I saw listed on Google Books, but without previews available, so I couldn't read them. I did find a little bit of information about the guy because I found his obituary, but it didn't even mention his poetry. It mentioned that he was like professionally a surgeon, and it seems like he died pretty young. As far as I can tell, a relatively unknown, unread amateur poet. And his work within this book isn't very consistent. It's not always great, but there were moments in here where I could feel his voice in the text, even where it's awkward, even where it's derivative, and it seemed worthwhile to me. This is the first poem that I flipped to. It's entitled To Wordsworth. See God in nature? No, instead I see myself, the silent woods, the senseless push for growth, the gaunt almighty crags that rear themselves into the sky. Cliffs should know how to bray. The lonely sea, the only noise shrieking gull, the million dead which will, they say, someday be lifted out of me. And this is silence. You brimming oceans and you little ships that crawl across the uncomplacent bosom of the deep, you gushing springs, you brooks that leap and tumble down to broad slow-moving rivers, you moon and stars, you foolish mockingbird, mistaking summer night for summer day, with singing in the hedge, you forest pools, you glades and trees and hills, you orchards bright, with unshed blossoms of the unborn fruit, you vast abysmal valleys, where at noon the shadows play like bees among the hum and murmur of the myriad unseen falls, you human flesh, you warmth of hand and breast, you glowing depth of eyes, you fragrant hair, why silent all? Speak, speak, be hushed no more. Lift up your voices, let me hear again the old refrain. Hush, now mayhap the world will speak. O silence of offended beauty, is this the punishment for one who loved too well? Earth, cry my sin against myself, until the skies resound with it, but speak. This book makes me want to read more overlooked, more maybe second-rate poets, because if they're writing from a place of genuine, real emotion, you'll absolutely have moments within their work, whether it's a line or an image or maybe a whole poem that is really extraordinary. And it's a delight to stumble across those things because you know not many people have. Something like this scratches a different itch. Picked up at that bookstore, Goya, The Disasters of War. This was on their dollar shelf. Pretty cool. Moving back home from San Diego to my local Goodwill, The Craft and Context of Translation. This book is from the 60s. It's a collection of lectures given by translators. This is neat. I think about translation a lot. I found myself deliberately seeking out older translations. I've also been wanting to find translators that I like for all of the great old classic works of literature. And the very first essay in this book focuses on the Greeks, and it's actually what led me to pick up this next book. This is Sophocles, his Oedipus plays, translated by Dudley Fitz and Robert Fitzgerald. This book is mentioned in here. I've tried picking up Fitzgerald before. Every time I see his Homer translations in the wild, I flip through them, but so far I've never got the urge to buy it. But in this book, they make a really interesting comparison between Fitzgerald's Oedipus and David Green's What is God Singing in His Profound Delphi of Gold and Shadow? What oracle for Thebes, the sun-whipped city? Fear unjoints me, the roots of my heart tremble. Now I remember, O healer, your power and wonder. Will you send doom like a sudden cloud, or weave it like nightfall of the past? Speak, speak to us, issue of holy sound. Dearest to our expectancy, be tender. This is the green. What is the sweet-spoken word of God from the shrine of Pytho, rich in gold, that has come to glorious Thebes? I am stretched on the rack of doubt, and terror and trembling hold my heart, O Delian healer, and I worship full of fears, for what doom you will bring to pass, new or renewed in the revolving years. Speak to me, immortal voice, child of golden hope. I'm not really sure what I think yet, but glad to have this. Other finds from the Goodwill. I got this the same day as I got the translation book. The Princeton Handbook of Poetic Terms by Ronald Green and Stephen Cushman. This just looked like so much fun. All of the entries are massive. Free verse, history. The origins of free verse predate the 20th century. Scholars have pointed to possible predecessors such as ancient Hebrew literature and its mode of translation, especially the King James Bible, the Epic of Gilgamesh, very early Greek poetry, relatively loose blank verse from the Renaissance, the choruses of John Milton's Samson Agonistes, Christopher Smart, William Blake, Macpherson. It goes on and on. This is delightful. I could look up each one of those now. Very happy to have this. It's really fun when you frequent like a thrift store that has books and you find someone has donated their whole collection of books. And that happened to me this week. Someone donated a nice little box of Latin books and I grabbed the good ones, I think. I didn't get them all, but I got these. We have the Vulgate. We have some Tacitus, some Cicero. I don't read Latin, at least not yet. I may take these to like an antiquarian bookstore and trade them for something that I can read. It's really tempting to just keep them. Maybe I'll keep the Vulgate. And lastly, this came with those beautiful Latin books. This is a really beautiful antique hardcover of Pride and Prejudice. Drawings by Robert Ball. Printed 1945 by Doubleday. That's almost everything. I do have one more. This is an absolutely massive Don Quixote with Gustav Dore illustrations. Look at that. Some of these are better than others. Better reproductions, I mean. This thing is huge. The text is massive. It's actually like big enough that it's gonna be kind of inconvenient to read. You have to read this at a table. But wow, those are fun. That's all. I'm gonna try to read some of these. See you next time.